make sure I'm doing that correctly. Okay, perfect. Okay, so today what we're going to work on is section 4.3, which is actually what is due tomorrow in class. And I'm going to share my screen, and I'm not the world's greatest at Zoom. So the first thing that I'm going to do, normally I do the whiteboard if you're used to coming in here with me, but I want to share something that we're going to kind of toggle back and forth between. So can everybody see this like white piece of paper in here that has a bunch of handwriting on it? I'm hoping. Yeah?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. Okay, so the good news for you all is on this section of homework, they ask you the exact same 2 questions every single problem. So if you get the gist of it down, then you will know exactly what you're going to do. And so I'm actually going to post this sheet right here in our class this evening after we get done with our SI session, but I wanted to show it to you right now because it's going to help us. So when we start doing problems in just a second, the very first question that they will always ask you to do is find the general shape of the graph. And then they'll give you some options to pick from, and you just kind of pick. It's like a multiple choice. So this is how we're going to do this. We're going to refer to every single problem that I give you. We're going to go back and forth between a whiteboard and this sheet right here, but I wanted to go over it first. So if you look at this one, kind of where my cursor is, you'll notice that it says y equals x squared, but then underneath it, I said even powers. So if you get anything in your homework, because y'all know this is randomly done, that says y equals like x to the 4th, or x to the 6th, or it could be x to the 22nd, whatever. As long as this exponent up here is even, the shape of your graph is going to be this U shape, which the fancy word is a parabola. But anytime it's y to an even power, it's always going to be that shape. So then if you'll come over here to this one, if it is y to an odd power, as long as it's 3 or bigger, it's this little curvy kind of shape where one end points up and the other end points down. So this would be things like x to the 5th, x to the 11th, anything like that, as long as this is something that's bigger than 3 or bigger than or equal to 3, sorry, and it's an odd number. Everybody with me so far?
I have one quick question. When it's an even number and like it looks like that graph, is that still considered a parabola or is that something completely different now?
No, it is still considered a parabola. Now, if we were to, and we're not doing it today, okay, but we will do it. We might look at some things later in the semester. You could get something real funny that wasn't just, let's say, like x to the 6th. If it said something like x to the 6th plus 5x cubed plus this, it would still be a parabola on the ends. In other words, they'd both point up or both point down, but it might have funny stuff in the middle. But for today, it'll just be one term. And so they're still parabolic in nature. They may just be a little bit steeper if this power right here is bigger.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Okay, so let's go down to this one down here. I'm going to scroll down a little bit so it's kind of foremost in our screen. You'll notice this one has these straight lines on either side of the X. If you remember, these are called absolute value bars. So this is if they give you something that has an absolute value in there, and we will do one of these in a minute, it is not a parabola. So I want you to see that. The parabola, this is a curve. It's like a U. These two things are straight lines. So basically, instead of a U shape, it's a V shape. So, and I know y'all, I don't draw perfectly, okay, but that right there is supposed to be an absolutely perfect straight line on this side. So if it's an absolute value of X, it's this V shape. All right. And then we have to talk about even and odd roots. So I put these underneath each other because I wanted you to realize something. So this up here is a power when this is an exponent. So like x to the second power. This is the square root. So anytime that you have this little house on one of these, this is a root. And these graphs look real different. So if it's an even root, it looks kind of like half of a parabola, but it fell over. So instead of it going up, it's kind of going off to the right. And so this would be what the general shape would be if it's a square root, which is a second root, a fourth root, a sixth root, anything that's even. And then this little curvy thing right here is any time that it is an odd root greater than or equal to 3. So like the cube root, the fifth root, anything like that. So be real careful when we start doing these problems. That's one of the first things that people are going to try to mix up is they'll mix these two graphs up and they'll mix these two graphs up. So be real cautious about that. And then the only other thing that we're going to talk about are these 1 over x's. So if you have 1 over x, and it can be any power here that's odd. So technically 1 over x, that's an x to the first. So that's an odd power. Or it could be 1 over x cubed or 1 over x to the fifth. It's going to look like these two pieces that are off here kind of catty-cornered from each other, diagonal from each other. And then if it's 1 over x squared, it's going to look like two pieces of a graph that are right next to each other side by side. So if it's 1 over x to the fourth or x to the 10th, it would look like this one. 1 over x to the fifth, it would look like this one. Okay. So let me stop there for a second. So that is just your generic shape. That doesn't tell you, I put a few points on all these graphs, but that's not going to tell you what points you are going to pick on your graphs. So I'm going to flip over here to a whiteboard real quick, and I'm going to show you what your instructions are going to say essentially every single time. So for every single time, I will just call this part A. Oh, that didn't look very good. They will say, find the general shape. And so that's the thing where we're going to be picking in just a minute. And then for part B, it's going to say, find 2 points on the graph and this is where you have to be really, really, really careful, guys. They say other than the origin. And so what that means is even if the origin, which remember is 0, 0, happens to be on your graph, they won't let you put that in as an answer because they get rid of it every single solitary time. So you can't use it, unfortunately. That makes all of us a little bit mad, but it's just what they do, I guess. So what I'm going to do for this first one, we're going to do one that isn't too bad to start off with, and then we're going to do quite a few of these. So I'm going to give you this. My first equation is going to be f of x equals 2/3 x to the fifth. All right, now, unfortunately, since I'm, drawing this on a whiteboard, it's a little bit more difficult for me to give you like a multiple choice kind of thing. So I'm going to show you what you should look for. This right here, I'm going to kind of put a circle around it, is what tells you what the general shape is. This is x to an odd power. I'm going to abbreviate that. Now, the way that we know that that's x to the odd power is because that is x to the fifth. So then if we come back over here and we look at our basic shapes again, right here, if we have x to a power, as long as it's odd, it is this curved shape right here. And so when you are doing this in Hawks, what would happen is you would have a whole bunch of things to pick from, And one of them would look something, oh, y'all, that's a bad one. Hang on. I didn't get that anywhere close. It's more difficult to draw on your screen than y'all think it is. There you go. Looks kind of like this. So that would be my general shape of the graph. Starts kind of at the bottom, looks like a little curvy, windy country road kind of thing, and then goes up to the top. But now what you have to do is you have to pick 2 points on the graph other than the origin. And what they also go in to tell you is they give you this, and this always bugs people. They have to say it has to fit in this. And people really get panicky about this. So I'm going to tell you, don't panic at all. All this means is that your points have to be somewhere in between -10 and 10. So in theory, we know that this graph has an infinite number of points and we could get really, really big, but nobody likes to work with big numbers anyway, especially when you're working in your head. So I wouldn't recommend picking big numbers anyway, so we won't even really worry about that. We're just going to stick with pretty small stuff. So here's the catch. I can have, I think I've got like 5 or 6 of you in this session right now. I can have like 5 or 6 completely different and completely correct answers. Your answer doesn't have to be mine, and it doesn't have to be your buddies, and it doesn't have to be, you know, your math tutors or anything like that. So all you want to do here is what I'm going to tell you is to pick an easy number. So we're going to say pick an easy X value. The only thing that you can't pick is 0. And the reason that you can't pick 0 is this right here. They throw out the origin. You're not allowed to do that. So other than 0, somebody tell me an easy number. What do you think? What's a good, easy number that's pretty easy in our head?
2.
2.
Okay, let's do 2. All right. Now, I'm going to be honest. I'm glad you picked it because 2 is actually too big in this one, but I'm glad that you picked it. So if we pick 2, let's pretend for a second. X is 2. The way that we would figure out what y would be is we would go back into this equation and we would say, hey, this is 2/3 times x, which you just told me was 2 to the 5th power. Now from here, you can do one of 2 things. You can either evaluate that by hand, or when you read the instructions in Hawks, it says you can give me a decimal number rounded to 4 decimal places. So I know what most every student's going to do. They're going to grab a calculator and they're going to put in 2 divided by 3 times 2 raised to the 5th. And you're going to get this. 21 point, I got to grab my calculator because I don't know all 4 decimal places. Oh, there we go. 3, 3, 3, 3. Now, this is completely correct. This is on the graph, but here's the problem. They told you nothing could be in between, or nothing could be any smaller than -10 or any bigger than +10. And you've got this right here. That's bigger than +10. So even though it is a point on the graph, they wouldn't accept it in your homework. So, okay, that means 2 is too big. So what's the number right underneath 2? What do you think? Give me a number smaller than 2.
1.
There we go. So let's try 1. Okay. We're going to do the same thing, right? If x is 1, y is 2/3 times 1 to the 5th power. Now this one you might could do in your head without grabbing a calculator, but we're going to do both. Just as a reminder, remember 1 to any power is still 1. And so all this does is give me 2/3. So what that means is that the point 1, 2/3 is on this graph. Now I'm going to circle that. Now, if you did not want to do that in your head like I did, and you wanted to actually put that in your calculator, 2/3 times 1 raised to the 5th power, you would get this instead. 0.6667. And either of those answers are correct. So 1, 2/3 or 1, 0.6667. You would need to round that last one to a 7. So let me stop right there for a second. What do we think?
Yes.
Yes? Okay, here's the problem. Look up here. It said find what? 2 points. Well, we've only found 1 point, haven't we? Because these 2 points that I've listed right here, they're really the same thing. One's just a fraction, one's just a decimal. So you found 1 point, but now you got to go find another one. I will tell you, just in my personal opinion, of course, it's not that you have to. I would always pick x equal 1, and I would always pick x equal -1. They're just the easiest numbers for everybody to work with. Now, I didn't say it was wrong if you picked any other number, but usually those numbers don't fall outside of that -10 to 10, so we don't end up with a problem like we did with 2 a minute ago, and those are generally the easiest ones. So if I'm going to say x is -1 in this one, then y would be 2/3 times -1 to the 5th. And if you plug that in your calculator, or let's say this, if you do it by hand, first of all, this time you're going to get -2/3. Or if you plug it in your calculator, you're going to get -0.6667. And then all you have to remember to do is to write it like a point when you're putting it in Hawks. Remember, your x is always first, your y is always second. So when you're writing this in Hawks, you would say -1, comma, and then whichever way you prefer. You can say -2/3, or you could say -0.6667. It really doesn't matter, either one. Okay. It doesn't pick one as a more correct than the other, or vice versa. All right, let me stop right there for a second. What do you think? I'm going to assume that means we're good so far.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. All right, let's try another one. So let me come in here with my eraser. Let's get rid of some of this stuff. So we're going to change our function this time. That's going to be out of here. Let's get rid of our general shape. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this right here, and I'm also going to get rid of this other than the origin. I'm just going to remind you, because I want a little bit more space to work here. I'm just going to remind you on every single one that we have to have 2 points. It has to stay in that -10 to 10 boundary that they give us, and we can't ever pick the origin. So I'll just keep reminding you of those, but if we get rid of them, then we have a little more space here. So my next function, let's call this one f of x, and we are going to do 4/7 times the absolute value of x. Okay, so remember your 2 questions are absolutely always A, find the general shape, and that's going to be a multiple choice thing, but I don't have choices, so we're going to have to look at that graph sheet here. And then B, find me 2 points on the graph. So let's flip over here to my little cheat sheet for a second. So here's my graphing sheet. Now that was an absolute value over there. I know it said 4/7 in front of it, but that doesn't give me the shape. That just gives me the points. What gives me the shape is the fact that it's an absolute value. So what is the shape of my absolute value graph over here? So what?
The V.
There you go. All right. So when you were doing this in Hawks, you would come over here and one of your choices in there would be something that looked like that. And so you would just click on that. You would say, okay, it's absolute value, so it's a V shape. So then we move to, in my opinion, the harder part, and that's finding 2 points on the graph. So remember, you can't pick the origin, so no fair picking 0. We all like 0, and the origin is actually on this graph, but they won't count it right, so we can't do that. And you got to stay with small numbers, but I'm going to do what we did last time, just because I think it's easiest. Pick x as 1. 1's easy to deal with, guys. We like it. So if x is 1, what that means is that y would be this function, 4/7 times the absolute value of 1. You just take out that x and put in whatever you happen to pick. Now, just as a reminder for me, what does the absolute value do to something? You remember?
It multiplies it?
Well, yes, it is going to multiply it, but before that, this 4/7, so I want to be real, you are correct, but I want to say one thing in front of that. That 4/7 is going to multiply by 1, but remember the absolute value makes everything positive. So the absolute value of 1 just is 1. So what this ends up being is 4/7 times 1, and 4/7 times 1 is just 4/7. So what that means is that if we were inputting this into Hawks, this right here would be one possible correct answer. Now, it's not the only correct answer by any means, but it is one possible correct answer. And then remember, if you don't like that 4/7 because you're somebody that doesn't like fractions, nobody ever said you had to input it as a fraction, you can grab your calculator and you can do 4 divided by 7, and that would be 0.5714 right there. So I'm going to put a big or right here. You can't do both of those because they're the same point, one or the other. Decimal or fraction, it doesn't matter which one. All right, but what have we not done yet? We got 1 point. How many do we need?
2.
2. There you go. All right, so let me erase this. So if you're going to find the second point, you have to pick another x value. You already picked x equals 1 over there. So what I'm going to do this time is I'm going to pick x equals -1. You can't find a different point if you don't have a different x value. So for whatever you picked for the first one, you better pick something else for the second one. And remember what that means is that y is going to equal 4/7 times the absolute value of -1. Now this is where you have to be careful. Absolute value makes every single thing positive. And so that's going to be 4/7 not times -1, but times +1.
And does it make everything within the absolute value positive, or the whole equation is now positive?
No, it makes everything within the absolute value positive. That's a good distinction. So let's pretend for a second there might have been a negative in front of that -4 or something. That would not have changed. Only what's inside that absolute value would have changed.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. And so what that means is you've got this other point, -1, 4/7, and this would be a second point on the graph. Now, I want you to notice something, and I'll be honest, this is the whole reason I picked the absolute value. When we go through here, we try to pick things that show people like weird occurrences, because I was a student, and when things that I thought were weird happened, I figured maybe I did something wrong. And so over the years, I've had students email me and they'll be like, okay, something messed up because I have different X's, but I have the same Y's. And so they'll be like, I have to be doing something wrong. Well, no, you're not. It's because of this absolute value right here. So you can have the X being 1 and the X being -1, and you still get a positive 4/7 for Y. So it's perfectly fine. We didn't do anything wrong here. All right, how are we doing so far? Everybody still happy?
Yes, ma'am.
All right.
Can we do one more?
Oh yeah, we're gonna do some more. We haven't even thought about it yet. Hang on. Yeah, y'all may get sick of these.
Sorry, I joined late.
Y'all may tell me to stop talking in a minute, all right? But we're gonna do quite a few of them, okay?
Okay. I wasn't sure how many we already did since I logged on late.
Oh no, it's okay. It's okay. This is just the second one, so no worries at all. No worries at all.
Good.
All right, so let me get rid of all this stuff. Let me get rid of my general shape right here. Okay, so those first two seemed to go okay. So let's go ahead and let's start to do things that I think may give you a little bit more of an issue. All right, so let's look at this one. F of x is 2 times the 5th root of x. All right, now remember, A and B never change. Find the general shape, find 2 points on the graph. Okay, so first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna go back over here to my little cheat sheet. So give me a second, I'm gonna flip back over here. Let's get my cheat sheet. Here we go. Now, you'll notice that that said a 2 in front, and then it said a 5th root. It wasn't a power. That little number was right inside a root. And so your roots are down here in these two equations. This is what the graph of an even root looks like. This is what the graph of an odd root looks like. And so I know that I put a 2 in front of there. I did it on purpose, but the root itself was a 5th root. And so when we talk about even and odd roots, it's this little number right here that we're going by. So it's an odd root. So our graph is going to be this kind of curvy road looking shape right here. So let's go back to the whiteboard and we'll draw it in place. So it looks kind of like that. All right, so once we have that, then remember 2 points on the graph. You always cannot give them the origin, even if the origin is on the graph. That's never an okay answer. And you have to stay in between that -10 to +10. But what I'm going to remind you, if you'll always pick x is 1 and x is -1, those generally work for you. And I know I was a student. I'll be honest, all of my kids are like dying right now because they're in all these college classes and the first semester, first tests are coming up. You always want to make your homework as short as possible. I get it. I understand. We all have stuff to do. So I would recommend picking these two values. So if x is 1, what that means is y is going to be 2 times the 5th root of 1. Now, this is where everybody gets a little antsy, and it really is kind of how your calculator works. My calculator, if I could show it to you kind of through the computer screen and whatever, my calculator doesn't have a 5th root button, but I'm actually going to put this up here as a reminder. Any root of 1, now and I'm going to be very specific, any root of +1 equals 1, always. I don't care what it is. The square root of 1 is 1. The cube root of 1 is 1. The 4th root of 1 is 1. We could keep going all day long. So this part right here, the 5th root of 1, what is the 5th root of 1 going to equal?
1.
1. And so this is just 2 times 1, and so that ends up just being 2. So what that means is that the point 1, 2 is one of the points that is on that graph. Now it does get a little harder over here. So if I come over here and I do -1, 2 times the 5th root of -1. Now, if you don't remember what this answer is, you are probably going to want to put it in a calculator. And so if you happen to have a TI calculator, you can go under your math key, and it happens to be number 5. It's an X root thing. Or if you don't want to have to remember where that is, the way that you can put this into your calculator is you can say that this is 2 times -1 to the 1/5 power. And I know that looks a little weird, but anytime you have a root, you can always do 1 over whatever that root is in the bottom. And so if you were to grab your calculator and you were to do that, you would get that this is actually equal to -2. So I'm going to put a little note up here. That means -1, -2 would be another point on my graph. Now let's stop right there for a second. What do we think so far? Good, bad?
I feel
Okay.
okay about it.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right,
I
let's
have
do
one question.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, okay. So in the Hawks for this formula for this map, it has AX 1 over N equals A in square root X. And I just wanted to know what that 1/n is, what they're like for the formula that they're saying.
Okay, hang on just a second. I'm going to erase this real quick because I'll be honest, I got lost somewhere in the middle. So let me erase
Sorry.
this. Oh no, you're okay. I just couldn't follow all of that. I hate to say it. I'm really a very visual person. Like I'm just one of these people that everything has to be written down. I'm one of those people that like buys the book even though everything's online. So
Oh, me too. I write everything down.
I just have to, but it's a good thing that you know that your brain works that way, because if you do, then you know how you learn best, and different people learn differently. It's just the way that we are. So tell me what that is again, and I'm going to write as you say it.
So for in Hawks, it has AX, and then like in a fraction 1/n equals A, and then in as in like the small over the square root number, and then X inside the square root.
Oh, hang on. I think I know what you're saying. Okay. So does it look like this? A with a little N one side
Yes.
like that.
And then it has like a 1/n and then an AX. Yeah, exactly like that. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, that is exactly what I was showing you for any root. So let's pretend A is a number. So for now, I'm just going to call it 3. Okay. So if I were to give you something that looked like this, if I were to give you 3 times, let's say, the 7th root of X. Now, this right here matches this side right here. Okay, my A is my 3, and then my N is a 7. We good so far?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, what they're trying to tell you is how you would put it into your calculator. And so if you go to that other side, what this is equal to is 3 times X to the 1/7 power.
Oh, okay.
Because of the fact that it's that 7th root, it's always 1 over whatever that root is in the denominator. The numerator is always a 1, and the denominator is always whatever they give you for your root.
Okay.
Does that make more sense?
Yeah, I saw that like 1/n, and I was like, am I supposed to be doing it on both sides? So that cleared it all up.
No, and the reason that you want to do that is because, most people don't have a 7th root button in their calculator, but you can raise something to the 1/7 power, and that way you can get a decimal answer if you need to. All right. So let's try one with a fraction in it, because most people hate fractions, right? I always tell everybody it's the math F word. So let's see what we can do with this one. So I'm going to happen to call this G of X. I called the rest of them F, but just because I call it G, please don't let that alarm you. Okay, doesn't mean a single thing. And this one is going to be 9 over 2x to the 3rd. Now this one, guys, is really commonly missed. And the reason that it's really commonly missed is because people look at it and they go, okay, I don't need to worry about the 9 over 2 yet. I just need to worry about the X, and that tells me what general shape is. And they look at this and they say, yay, it's X to the 3rd. But here's the problem. This X to the 3rd is underneath that line. Everybody agree? So that X to the 3rd is in the denominator. So if it's in the denominator, when you come over here and you look at our little graph cheat sheet, it is not this. This would be X to the 3rd in the numerator. We're going to have to come down here. This is that over X being to an odd power. So we are down here in this graph right now. And so since it's an odd power, that means I'm going to have one part of my graph kind of going a curvy like this, one part going like this. Now you may have noticed that we have these little dashed lines that go kind of right here on the y-axis and also right here on the x-axis. If you don't know what those are called asymptotes. We are going to get to those in a lot more detail in this class, but it is after the midterm exam. So just for right now, know that they're there, that we will cover like really what they are and how you get them and all that kind of stuff, probably in April, to be honest with you. So we're going to have this general shape. So let's flip back over here. And I'm going to go ahead and just plot that for you just so that we know. So here we go. Got this little curve line here. Got this little curve line going like that. So there's my general shape. All right, next thing we got to find 2 points. Remember, can't be the origin and can't go outside of -10 and 10. What's our easy x number to pick?
1.
1, there you go. Pick x is 1. Now remember, I know we're picking 1 like all day and all night. You can pick something else. It's just 1's easy. We like easy. If that's true, then this would be 9 divided by 2 times 1 to the 3rd. So all I did was take out the x, put in the 1. Keep in mind that you have to do your order of operations on these, and your order of operations says you have to do the exponent first. So 1 to the 3rd is just 1. So this ends up being 9 over 2 times 1, which is just 9 over 2. Now, once again, if you want to leave it like that, you can. Hawks gives you the option of inputting a decimal, and you're welcome to do that as well. I'm just going to go ahead and leave it as my fraction. But if you wanted to grab your calculator and put in 9 divided by 2, you'd get 4.5, and you could put 1 comma 4.5 as well. Either one, doesn't matter. All right. Next one that we're going to do, we're just going to pick x is -1. Oop, I ran out of space right there. That doesn't look like that. Let's get rid of this. So if x is -1, we'll do the same thing. Y is 9 over 2 times -1 cubed. Now this is where you have to be very careful. So I'm going to do this up into some scratch work over here because I don't have a whole lot of room. But to remind you what -1 cubed is, that is -1 times -1 times -1. So you'll notice you've got 3 negatives there. So what that means is that this is 9 over 2 times -1. So this ends up being a negative answer right here. And so the point on this graph would be -1, -9 over 2. Or -1, -4.5, either one. We still good?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, everybody happy? All right, you ready for the hard one?
Sure.
I was gonna say, that didn't sound very enthusiastic. I always ask people that and they're like, I don't know if I'm ready for the hard one or not. So the hard one is gonna be a bit of a preview of what is to come. So section 4.3 is all about general shape of a graph, and that's going to be really important in the next section that we cover, which is section 4.4. All right, so you want to pay attention to the general shape, and then it's about finding points on the graph. Now you're going to learn a lot more rules, I guess that's a good way to say it, in section 4.4 with Ms. Young on Thursday night. So, but this one I wanted to do for the last one in this section, just to kind of show you what can happen. Let's do the 7th power just for the fun of it. There we go. So we're going to deal with -4x to the 7th. And then what I'm going to do is put a little arrow right here. I'm going to put a little star. This is the first problem that I have done tonight that has a negative out in front. And that's going to cause us to have a little bit of an issue. Okay, so before we think about the negative, we want to come over here and we want to look at this. This is x raised to what power?
7.
7th. Okay, so let's come over here. Let's get our cheat sheet back out. Okay, now remember, this isn't a root. It's not the 7th root, so it's not one of these. It's an actual x to a power. So it's not going to be this one because that 7's not even. It is going to be this one because it's x to the 7th. So it looks like my basic shape is going to look something like this, the little curvy road. here's the issue. So I'm going to put something over here just for a minute. Looks kind of like this because it's x to an odd power. But the negative, does anybody know what a negative does to a graph? You remember from a different math class or anything like that?
Reverse or flip?
Yeah, it flips it. So this negative right here, I'm going to make a little note. Here we go. The negative flips it. And so what that means is you'll notice this graph kind of starts at the bottom and goes to the top. So because we have that negative, it's going to flip it. It's going to start at the top and go to the bottom. There you go. Now, one more time, what's the only way that we knew that it would flip over instead of looking like our generic stuff over there would?
Because it's a negative.
It's got the negative in front, right? Okay. Here's the good news though, that doesn't make the second part any different. The second part is still find 2 points on the graph. So even though it has a negative, we're still going to go about it the same way. We're just going to pick x is 1. If x is 1, then y would be negative 4 times 1 to the 7th. Now, what is 1 to any power?
1.
1. Okay, so this would just be negative 4 times 1, which would just be negative 4. Remember, when you're writing this in Hawks, you always have to write it like a point, and the x always comes first. The y always comes second. And then I'm going to come over here and I'm going to pick my next easy x value, negative 1. So y would be negative 4 times negative 1 to the 7th. Now, I'm actually going to take the time to write this one out. So if this one looks really ugly, I'm going to apologize now. But this means I've got 7 different negative 1s. Y'all, that's a lot. Okay, so we got that negative 4, but then we have 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to run out of room. So hang on, I'm going to kind of write them down here. 5, 6, 7. So if you look at this, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Technically, I have 8 negative signs there because I have 1 on the negative 4. And anytime I have an even number of negatives, that means that my answer is going to be positive. Yep. So this one means that we end up with negative 1, comma, positive 4 on that graph right there. Just remember, when you're picking points on your graph, you can pick things other than 1 and negative 1, but I really wouldn't recommend it because of the fact that you have to stay in that negative 10 to 10 range. And even on something like this, if you picked 2, you would be well outside of that range. And so if you'll stick with these, you'll have to redo less work. All right. So let's stop right there. What do we think?
I'm okay.
Everybody okay? Well, who has some questions on this? What else do we need to discuss?
I have a question.
Sure, what you got?
So there was one question on the certify that I had a lot of trouble with,
Okay.
and it was negative 4 fourth root of x divided by 3.
Okay, give me 1 second. Negative 4 fourth root of x divided by 3. Okay, so I need one button that just erases part of this and leaves everything else, and I haven't figured out how to do that yet. Okay, so negative 4 fourth root of x all divided by 3?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So first things first, let's look at the shape. Now this negative 4 and this 3 are going to come into play when we pick points, but right now, just this part right here, we're going to talk about the shape and then we'll talk about that negative in a second. So fourth root of x. So let's come over here to my cheat sheet. So fourth is an even root. Everybody agree with that?
Yes.
Okay, so that means it's going to be this graph. Now we're going to run into a problem here, and so it's probably a good thing that she's asked this question so that we can address this problem. So it's going to look like this right here. So it kind of looks like that half of a parabola that fell over. But what do we also know is in that problem that she asked about that this doesn't talk about? What was in the very front?
The
It's
negative.
negative.
The negative. So what is the negative going to do to a graph always?
Flip it.
Flip it, which way? Kind of upside down.
Mhm.
All right. So what that means is that I'm going to write them both. Instead of like this, because that's what a normal fourth root would look like, it would flip it and make it look like this. So I'll circle that one right there. Since we've got that negative, there we go. All right, now let's go in and let's pretend that we don't have any problems yet. Now, and I say pretend because we're going to run into a problem in just a second. Okay, so if x is 1, y is going to be -4 times the fourth root, oops, there we go, of 1 over 3. Let me get rid of that for a second. Let me draw that a little better. Okay, now what is any root of 1? Do y'all remember?
1.
1. Okay, so this is just -4 over 3. So that means that we get this point. 1, -4/3. Life's real good. Okay, now I'm going to tell you this. If you're taking notes and you don't want to write down something that is wrong, what I'm fixing to write down, stop writing. If you want to write down something that's wrong because you think you're going to do it and you want to make a note of, hey, don't do this, then be my guest. But this, what I'm fixing to write down is going to run us into the ground, basically. So we get in a habit. We pick 1, we pick -1, right? So everybody comes in here, they go, yay, let's pick -1. Life is real good. Y equals -4 times the fourth root of -1 over 3. And you can't do this. Now, if you were paying real close attention to the graph, you would know that you can't do this because if you look at this graph right here, it starts at this point. Technically, it starts at the origin right there. There is no part of the graph that's off on this side. So you can't have a -1. If you try to do the fourth root of -1 in your calculator, it will give you an error message. So this is a problem where you cannot pick an x being a negative number. So sorry, we can't do that. We're going to have to scrap that. But just because we can't pick x being a negative number doesn't get us out of the instructions that say we still have to find 2 points on the graph and you still can't use the origin. So no fair plugging in 0 and 0. So give me another easy number. If 1 won't work, what do you think we could try now?
2.
2. Okay. And 2 is wonderful, but I'm going to be really honest with you. 2 also poses a problem, and that may be the problem that you were having when you said I had a lot of trouble with this, and it's right here. We plug in 2. That's great. So we have -4 times the fourth root of 2 divided by 3. But the fourth root of 2 is something that even me, y'all, I've got a doctorate degree in this stuff. I don't have a clue what the fourth root of 2 is off the top of my head. So you have a choice now. You have to remember how to plug this into your calculator. And it was that question, and I'm sorry, I don't know everybody's voices yet and all that kind of stuff. It was that question that one of you asked me a minute ago. You said how, what is this a sub 1 over n that they're writing? So this is -4 times 2 raised to the 1/4 power over 3. That's how you would plug that into your calculator. So since you picked 2, that's why we have the 2. And then since it's the fourth root, that's why it's to the 1/4 power. So then you would literally grab your calculator, plug in -4 times 2, use your caret. And in fact, let me write this right here, -4 times 2, use your caret, put that whole exponent in parentheses. So 1 divided by 4. And then you would divide by what?
3.
3. And that gives you something really ugly, but that's okay because really ugly is all right. It's just remember Hawk says that we have to round this off to 4 decimal places. So if I round it off to 4 decimal places, I had negative 1.5856 right here. Now, y'all picked 2. Did we have to pick 2?
No.
Nuh-uh, you sure didn't. You could have picked 3 or you could have picked 4. Now, could you have picked 12 or something like that? The answer is you could not because remember, we have to keep it in between negative 10 and positive 10. So I don't want to say that you could pick anything because that's not quite true, but you could have picked something other than 1 or 2. All right, does that help with that one a little bit?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Anybody else got anything else?
Could we do another one like this?
Sure. Do you have one in particular or you want me to make one up?
You can make one up.
I can make one up, all right.
Yes, ma'am.
While I'm erasing, anybody else got one in particular that's like this? I can kill 2 birds with 1 stone. If not, I don't mind making one up. I'm just making sure. All right, let's see. So I'm not gonna do a 4th root because that's what we just did last time. So,
I have a quick question.
Oh, sure.
Can we use a graphing calculator on the final exam?
Yes, but with caution. So I'm going to say this the right way, and I want you to make sure that you understand what I'm saying. Yes, you can. Having said that, there are things that your calculator will do for you. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, then like if you don't know how to do this, just trust me, it will. Your calculator will find the vertex of a parabola for you. Your calculator will find x-intercepts for you, things like that. So you can use a calculator on the exam, but you would have to show me the algebra behind questions like that. You couldn't just get the answer from your calculator and expect credit for it. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yes.
But like the question we just did, I could use a calculator for that, but still show the work between it, or
you would have to, you could use a calculator that might help you find the general shape. And I'll be honest, I wouldn't know if you looked that up or if you memorized it. And you would need a calculator in order to find the decimal that went with those points. But any calculator would have given you that, not just a graphing calculator.
okay.
So you really would have to have a calculator to do that last thing that we did, like the 4th root of 2. Nobody can do that without it. So,
Yeah.
okay. All right, so
Okay, real quick, I'm sorry. I think I don't know how to use my calculator because I didn't get that answer. So how were y'all putting it in? Because mine went crazy.
Can you tell me what kind of calculator you have?
I have the TI 83.
83. Okay, this is exactly what you should put. You ready?
Yes.
-4.
Okay, -4.
Times.
Okay.
2.
Okay.
Caret. Open parenthesis. 1 divided by 4. Close
Okay.
parenthesis. And then keep going. Divided by 3 equals.
All right. And so -1.585, something like that. Okay. I guess I missed the caret.
Oh, yeah, that will do it. Because if you did that, then you were actually multiplying and not raising it to an exponent.
Okay. Yeah. Awesome. Thank
Okay.
you so much.
No problem. Okay, so let's do another one because then that'll give you some more practice on the calculator too. All right, so I'm not going to do a negative this time, but we're going to do, we'll do another fraction. How about 2/9, but this time we're going to do the 6th root of x.
I have a quick question again.
Sure.
Do we need a graphing calculator? Because I don't have one. I've just been like trying to do it on paper, but I didn't know like
Same
like,
here.
everything I had to show my work, or,
You
know?
don't have to have one. On the test, there will be something that we do in chapter 5 that will be much easier if you do have a calculator, a graphing calculator. And so what I will do on the exam that you actually have to take, like at a testing center or, on a lockdown browser or something like that, I will put a picture of the graph on the test so that will help you out. Okay. But you don't have to have one, no, because I will do that, put a picture on the graph so that, or put a picture on the test so that you're okay. All right.
Okay.
Can I add to that? They're
Yes.
really expensive. I got mine used on eBay for $15 if y'all want to look at that.
Oh, that is an excellent price.
What kind of calculator was that again?
The TI-83.
Yeah, if you want a TI, I recommend a TI-83 or a TI-84. They are actually the same faceplate. Like if you look at them, unless you see the number up in the top, whatever corner, you're not going to know the difference. The catch is an 84 is programmable, but y'all aren't going to be programming anything. So who cares if you get a calculator that's programmable? So but they're really the same calculator, same functionality. So if you can find one of those that's pretty cheap, either one of those would be good. If you're going to take statistics, sometimes people that take both of these, you will want a calculator that will do some statistic stuff, and this would work for that as well. So just know if that's in your future, you might, especially if you're trying to find it cheap someplace, because $15 is a great price. Because if you buy them new, they're about $100 bill. It's a lot of money, a lot of money. So
Thank you, whoever said that.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thank you.
This too, if you happen to, let's say at the end of the semester, be looking for one for like your next math class or whatever, a lot of times people will sell them at the end of terms as well. Now it won't help you right now, but like if you're going into another math class, you decide you want it, look around May, people sell them. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, so now I promise that these are almost close to an hour, so I'm going to run through this whiteboard, or I'm going to run through this graph shape part real quick so we can get to this. So this is still an even root, so it's going to look like this one right here, and there's no negative, so that means that we are not going to need to flip it around or anything like that. So the general shape would be this little guy right here, okay? Starts right here at the origin. That's kind of hard to do, and then it kind of goes off that way. So now the one that nobody has trouble with is the 1. So if x is 1, y is 2/9 times the 6th root of 1. And the reason I say nobody has trouble with this one is because any root, I don't care, 6th, 12th, whatever, this part right here is 1 always. And so this is just going to equal 2/9 times 1, which is just 2/9. But now let's come over here and let's do this. Now on the last one, we picked 2. So I want to pick 3 this time. Yes, you can pick 2, you can pick 4. I don't care. I want to pick 3 just so that we can do something a little different. And so y would be 2/9 times the 6th root of 3. Now, once again, this is something that, guess what, guys, you don't know it. I don't either. So you're going to have to plug this into your calculator. And so I'm going to write out exactly what you're going to plug in. The first thing that we're going to do is 2 divided by 9. Because that 2 divided by 9 takes care of this part right here, 2/9. And then we're going to multiply it by, and then we have to take care of this part. The way that we're going to do that is 3 caret, and what exponent are we going to do? Do we remember?
1/6.
Yep. So that's going to be 1 divided by 6. So grab your calculators. 2 divided by 9 times 3 raised to parentheses 1 divided by 6, and then hit equals. And remember, on all of these, you're going to get really ugly numbers. So what do y'all get? Anybody brave?
At 0.2668.
Okay, so it's 0.26687, and so since we're rounding that, it would be 0.2669. And then I'm going to circle this little guy right here, because there you go. And then remember, the reason we did 1/6 is because it was a sixth root. And I just picked 3. You can pick any number you want to. Okay. Did all of y'all get that when you were plugging it into your calculator?
Yes.
Yeah? Okay, good. Okay, so we're gonna call it an evening. If you've got any buddies or whatever that didn't show up tonight, I say this usually every Monday, but for those of you that I haven't seen before, I live in the middle of nowhere. I live in the country. There is no way that my internet will let me load up an hour's worth of a video. So as soon as I get to the office tomorrow morning, I will load it there on our SI page, so it'll be there. And then I'm also, what I can do this evening, and I'm going to put an announcement out. I will load that little basic graphs sheet tonight that I keep kind of toggling back and forth between. So if you want to log in and look at that, it'll be in an announcement this evening.
Okay, I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah, I can do that from home. I just, the hour-long video, my internet just like, I'd be here till Christmas. Seriously. My kids get really mad, anyway. So y'all have a great rest of the evening. If you have something, you run into anything, y'all be sure to let me or Miss Young know. Okay. And
Yes,
don't forget about your homework due tomorrow. All right.
all right.
All right.
Thank you.
See y'all then.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Bye. Good night.